Tomac, Roczen, Sexton, and many other of the sport's top stars have decided their future for 2026 and beyond. Welcome back to Vital MX. I'm your host, Michael Lindsay, and as always, any of our Newsbreak or Rumor Mill features are brought to you by our fine friends at 6D Helmets. Learn more about the third generation ODS omnidirectional system at their website. This comes from the helmet company that brought rotational energy management to the forefront of the motocross community's mind. So learn more again at 60helmets.com and check out that new ATR3. So yeah, again, last time we did one of these a little over a month ago, we said probably around the first outdoor or two, things would be settled. And realistically, it's a couple weeks later, but by Friday at Fox Raceway, it seems like the majority of the big decisions we've been waiting on were decided. Unless you've been living under a rock, or maybe you just don't follow moto super closely, you probably know by now that all the rumors point to Tomac going to KTM and Chase Sexton at Kawasaki. The Chase Sexton at Kawasaki rumor, of course, has been around since the midpoint of Supercross season, maybe a little bit earlier, and we were always waiting to see what KTM was going to rebuttal with, because KTM had first rider refusal. We even heard there were some other things in their contract that could trigger an auto renew, maybe they were waiting out. Either way, we were waiting to see what they did. Now, what's interesting with a team, and I've heard this from so many teams in the paddock, pretty much everybody always has a first rider refusal on a rider, which means if rider gets an offer from Team B while Team A has a first rider refusal, it usually means that if Team A matches the financials and kind of any other special request items and basically offers a similar or better contract than what Team B offers, they automatically get your services. It's legally binding. And in this case, yes, Chase had one of those just like anybody else. However, all teams have told us it's kind of hard to enact if a rider doesn't want to stay. They can use first rider refusals to kind of view what a rider's market value is, see what offers that their current rider that may leave or is looking at maybe leaving is getting. They can use that and decide how to best counter it. However, to actually enact the legal clause of, hey, we matched it, now you have to ride for us, I've only heard of that happening a very thin handful of times in my time in the industry. Again, being you can't really force someone to be there. So we'd heard from good sources that KTM did have these style conversations with Chase. As we see, ultimately at this point, it looks like they didn't go anywhere. Chase now will be going to Monster Energy Kawasaki. So where does that leave Red Bull KTM? Yes, they have Aaron Plessinger under contract. They announced that mid-Supercross season. Yes, Tom Vial's deal is either done or almost done, so he will be joining him in the 450s. And they are going to run a third 450. Initially, we were really curious because when they knew that Chase could be on his way out, we had heard that they were probably going to do two 450s and two 250s. But then the golden goose became available, that being Eli Tomac. Yes, we've known since, the later stages of Supercross. I did one of these videos at East Rutherford talking about his opportunities, maybe at Ducati and maybe at KTM and maybe Triumph, that Eli Tomac was on the market, that Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing would not be able to come to an agreement, especially as Eli revealed at the press conference for Fox Raceway. I straight up asked him during that presser, hey, are you going to be back for 2 more years? The PR said this, worded a little more elegantly than that, but still, Eli came back and confirmed. He said he's usually always a man of his word, but he was going to break that word this time, and he planned on competing for the next 2 years and in a somewhat full-time, basically in a full-time status, because I asked him about outdoors, and he confirmed that. So that's what Tomac's looking for. Works out perfect for Red Bull KTM. They were able to get him to test the bike. It's beautiful when you have a private facility in your home state to be able to do that out of sight, out of mind. And yes, Ducati also sent up a bike and a crew to evaluate with Eli and figure out if they could get his services. We know that the KTM test went well. We heard some mixed opinions on the Ducati test. The biggest thing with the Ducati test was timeline. From what we're aware, Eli had to have given KTM an answer right around Fox Raceway, either right before the event or right after if he was in. The Ducati test was maybe a week and a half before that, and there just wasn't enough time to come back. Eli, if he's going to race for 2 more years, that man is in a position that he doesn't want to be developing a program, doesn't want to have question marks on who's going to be there. He wants to know what's going on because he's not the kind of guy at the tail end of his career that looks to be interested in doing the legacy develop a project or something like that. If he's going to be here 2 more years, he wants to have the opportunity to win every single time he lines up, no questions asked. So again, that kind of confirmed Eli's decision to take the KTM offer, giving them 3 450s for next year and 1 250F with Julian Beaumer, who is still under contract. So KTM's all wrapped up. And for now, Cowie is wrapped up with Jorge Prado and Chase Sexton going forward. We already talked about the Yamaha team in the prior videos, but let's do it. Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing 450s. Very simple. We're looking at Cooper Webb and Justin Cooper all year. Christian Craig is still on a Supercross only deal, albeit that's through the 250 team, but it's on a 450, so that technically gives them 3 guys for Supercross. And still all the talk points towards Hayden Deegan making his transition to a 450 come the Pro Motocross season. So basically they will have 3 guys all year. Let's talk about one of the other interesting pieces that was floating around right at the end of Supercross. That was Malcolm Stewart. There was a lot of talk of him having an offer from Triumph. We confirmed it with multiple sources that they had in fact had him try the bike, make an offer, the whole 9 yards. But he was also waiting out to see what would happen with KTM Husky Gas Group through the transition of their financial restructure, because he really likes the team and the environment he is in. Some people saw the FXR gear deal as a foreshadowing, but no, completely separate. His own deal has nothing to do with a potential Triumph. In fact, I think they'd rather have him on Husky, a little bit better, spread of branding. Either way, from what we've heard since then, Malcolm has decided to stay with the Husqvarna group or Gas. That's a whole nother conversation on which brand they'll be racing. Either way, he will be there on a 450 alongside RJ Hampshire. So Malcolm is staying put. So him and RJ will lead up, whether it's Husky or Gas on 450s. 250s, it looks like Ryder DeFrancesco has re-signed. They're talking to Casey Cochran. They're also talking to Daxton Bennick. They could run all 3. We will wait and see. 250s are getting a little bit more settled at the moment. So where does that leave Triumph? 450 guy. Well, it gets them back to their original plan. There was talk of them just moving Jordan Smith up for the whole year. Then they made Malcolm the offer, and Jordan was just going to ride 250 indoor and 450 outdoors. Based on people we know that are talking to his representation about gear deals, they're saying he is now going to be the 450 guy all year for the Triumph squad. So that will be their introductory 450 rider. Who knows? There's still a chance maybe they could get something else going as well. We know that there was kind of some people connecting the dots that maybe Dean Wilson had talked to him, because Dean had talked about having a full-time offer and had testing a bike. But either way, for now, Jordan on the 450, 250s. Swole has upped into a new deal. Faulkner has another year on his contract, and Robertson has another year on his contract. But Robertson, of course, is dealing with major wrist issues. Austin's performance has been rough. We'll see what happens there. And then they also have Mikkel Harrup on the team for outdoors, who is scheduled to go back to GPs to debut the 450 for Triumph and MXGP. Although we've heard murmurings that the team is maybe considering trying to keep him in the States. I feel like their 250 team is going to be a little bit of a later decision this year to weigh out a lot of different factors, so we'll have to wait and see there. Now, what about Roczen? We mentioned him at the top of the show. Again, this kind of comes into some of the deals this year we thought maybe would really have some unique changes, have just kind of settled down. It's been known since the late part of Supercross that Kenny was actually intending to go ahead and stay at HEP, that he would not be pursuing the Ducati program. And yeah, we haven't really heard much as of lately, but everything points to Roczen re-upping with the Progressive Insurance, basically the HEP Suzuki program as a whole for the next 2 years. So Kenny should be staying put. Now, what else is going on there? Again, we said Cowie is Prado and Sexton, so Anderson? Anderson has really, we would say, 2 options at the moment. It would either be going to Ducati or to be going to HEP Suzuki. And based on some people that we know that are involved in World Supercross, they seem to feel strongly that Anderson will be racing World Supercross this winter on a HEP Suzuki, pointing us to think that that will be his more likely landing spot. Again, that one doesn't sound like it's done. That just seems to be the direction it might be trending at the moment. But we, again, think he also is potentially talking to Ducati at this point. Another rider we mentioned, the last one that could end up anywhere and nowhere at the same time, is Justin Barsha. Now that, again, he really had to wait for some of the musical chairs to fall, because at one point in talking to him, yes, like the conversations with Club were real, with a Phoenix, with everybody. Justin's on the hunt, trying to figure out what to do for the next step of his career. And everybody just defaulted him because he was in Troy the Designs gear and had that relationship with Troy that he would be on Ducati. Well, now that the Eli thing has settled down and kind of gone by the wayside, and again, Anderson's a maybe and maybe not, it really does seem like things might be defaulting to Barsha's position. However, we thought that at one time before, and that was not the case, so we can't really stamp that. It just makes the most sense at this point, because really, who else is Ducati going to get for the US for next year? It seems to be a no-brainer. Again, we feel real bad. Justin's will probably be one of those later to figure out things. But as all these musical chairs start to stop, it just starts to make sense, and it kind of ends up being the option. So we'll see. Not much to talk about with Honda, Jet, Hunter Lawrence, staying put, easy as can be there. Chance Hymas staying put. the conversation is around Joe Shimoda. Joe has either made his decision or is right about done with it, and it's either to stay with the HRC Honda Progressive Group for another 2 years, or it is to go to Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki. That's kind of, I would say, the biggest thing we're waiting with to get done on the 250 side of things. Speaking of Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki, yes, they still have McAdoo and Hammaker under contract for next year. Kitchen is on a new 2-year deal starting next year, and Drew Adams starts a 2-year professional contract next year. So there's 4 guys locked in. That leaves Masterpool and Marchbanks on the, basically on the edge out, because they're both on 1-year deals. Ties was announced as a multi-year, but we found out from asking the team and Mitch that it was actually an option. So we do believe strongly that Ty is the most likely person out there. Garrett has been performing really well. If Joe doesn't go to the team, we think the default would be Garrett unless Mitch has something else up his sleeve. There's always the Wolf talk. There's always different conversations going on. Even if Joe does go there, maybe they figure out room for Garrett, albeit that puts them, I believe, back to a 6-man team, which it's always a lot, period. Budget, people, everything. Now, the other one I mentioned, though, is what if Joe were to go to PC, what happens at Honda? I'll be honest, I have almost no clue. I don't know who they're interested in. I don't know if they would want to run another 250, if they want to focus on what they have. I really can't answer that at this time with any real information or anything that is plausible at this point. Now, another one we have not touched on, of course, is the Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing 250 squad. They have a slew of riders already under contract. Max Anstey is good for next year. Pierce Brown is good for next year. Nate Thrasher is good for next year. Hayden's good for next year, at least in Supercross. Cole Davies is good for, I think, 2 more years. So there's 5 riders under contract. Who is on the outside looking in? Mosman and Bennick are 2 riders that do not have contracts for next year. If Mosman is unable to stay at Star, we pretty much know at this point it would be a guarantee he's going to try to put together a deal with Yuriv Konski's Quadlock Honda team. That seems to be the default. For Mosman, it's in the same area. Basically, he's already in. I know he's not super interested in uprooting his life and moving in this position. It would be an easy transition for him, but I also know he really wants to stay at Star Racing, so we'll have to wait that out. And then same thing, Dax Bennick wants to stay, but has multiple teams in contact with him, such as the Rockstar Racing effort and Club MX, amongst others. Speaking of Rockstar, there's also been that rumor about that sponsorship changing. We believe now it is going to stay put with the Gas Husky group, whichever brand of bike they choose to race, because we are pretty much dead sure they're only going to race one of those bikes, either the Gas or the Husky. It was a little bit tied to Malcolm. We think if Malcolm had gone to Triumph, we're pretty sure Rockstar would have left. That was kind of what everything was pointing to, but since he's decided to stay, we believe Rockstar will be staying put. Again, you have your clubs, your Phoenixes, your Bar-X, some of these guys, AO, they're trying to make moves, but they have to wait for a few more things to settle down before they can really lock in their positions. Club does have some riders signed for next year, such as Cody Schock and Maximus Volan, along with Alex Fedorstov. But again, they still have some spaces to fill up. Your AOs, your Phoenixes, again, Barxes, those kind of guys are starting to play out their rosters now. So where does that leave us? Not a lot of places. Like I said, 250s would come down to what is Joe's final decision, and does that affect some of the PC spots like a Garrett? What would Marchbanks do if that were to happen? Who could, would Honda replace? Those are kind of the questions in the 250 class. Where will Masterpool end up? Because like I said, we're pretty much in a spot where we do not believe he'll be at Pro Circuit next year. So those question marks need to be filled a little bit with Bennett, Cochran, those kind of guys as well. 450s, however, has been nearly a closed book at this point in terms of any real movement outside of finally deciding what happens with Barsha Anderson and the Ducati team. There are, of course, some straggler deals below that that will get moved around a little bit, but that's kind of it for the big names. So we're only into the middle of July, and for the most part, all the big exciting news is pretty much wrapped up. Per typical how our sport works, though, privacy clauses and other weird things in contracts, other sports can announce their drivers and their riders early. Yeah, we can't till basically October 1st. Once SMX is wrapped up, a lot of this stuff will start becoming official, unless riders for some reason break out of their current deals or something unique. But yeah, you're gonna see all this news become official PR stuff, usually around October 1st, but until then, it will all be just comments of, we think this is done, we know this is done, it's just not official. So as always, you got any thoughts, comments, throw them down below. I'll try to get to them. I'd love to hear some of your rumors or thoughts, or even some of the stuff you would have liked to have seen happen. Some stuff's done, but tell me what you would have liked to have seen happen. And as always, thanks for watching Vital MX.